I'm Carol Klein, and this is my home Glebe cottage. When I'm not presenting or writing about gardening, this is where I spend most of my time, and where I've been honing my horticultural skills for 40 years. Whether you've got a spacious plot, a tiny patio, or a few window boxes, there's nothing more exciting and satisfying than creating your own garden. From basic to more advanced techniques, I believe anyone can learn how to do it. Whether you're a complete novice or an experienced gardener, I want to help you develop the skills to make your garden grow. I'm ready. Are you? Spring is the most wonderful time for gardeners. There's nothing as exciting as watching the first shoots appearing. And then everything seems to burst into life. I absolutely love it. It's astonishing. In just 1 week, how the garden's come on. It's changed substantially. Last week, the volume of soil to plants, the soil was winning. This week, the green's taken over. And not just green, but there's splashes of flowers here and there. But the thing that's changed most dramatically are these pots of fritillary. Look at that. You could barely see them, and then one after another they came through the soil, just gradually, just piercing the soil, as though they were sort of sniffing the air. But now they're heading for the sky. This is a lovely, lovely plant. Fritillaria imperialis, the imperial fritillary. And it's from the Middle East right the way over to northern India. These fritillaries are going to look after themselves, but there are a few other things that need a bit of help from me. You can still get a cold snap at this time of year, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't get planting. This is my ghost in the garden. Last week we planted this pot full of gorgeous things, euphorbias, perennial wallflowers, hellebores and little violas. But all those plants will have come from somewhere where they've been really looked after. They've probably had protection. And now here I am forcing them to live outside. And there's a danger of frost too. So we've put this over this fleece. It just goes on at night, and then providing the temperature's above freezing, they've just got to get used to it. Look at that. They look absolutely champion. Now I've got really quite fancy fleece. It's just right for doing this, just propped up with these canes. But traditionally, if you've just put your bedding plants out and then you see the weather forecast and it says there might be some frost, you dash out with newspapers, weight them down if it's windy, and then take them away the next morning. So that way you can protect your plants, whether they're in a container or whether they're in the ground. But I mean, the great majority of our plants, either in the garden or in the wild, don't need any kind of protection at all. It takes more than a touch of frost to stop one of our most joyful wildflowers from showing its sunny face. Could anything announce spring so cheerfully and so definitely than these beautiful Narcissus pseudo-narcissus, our own native Lent lily or wild daffodil? It's a springtime treat to see these daffodils growing in the wild, and it's so inspiring. I wanted to replicate just the same sort of thing in my own garden. This long, narrow bed has always been a bit too bare in spring. So last year and the year before, I planted masses of this lovely daffodil. It's called W.P. Milner. So when I put these in, I knew I had to plant them really deeply. You do with daffodils, and it was quite a job with this big bird cherry to find spaces in between the roots. I think what I like best about it is it still has a hint of that deep yellow at the back of its flower, but the whole thing is pale and milky almost. It's a selection from our native daffodil, from the one you see in the wild. It doesn't shout spring, it whispers it. It's a total delight. Wouldn't you agree, Fifi? Yeah? You like them too, don't you? Come on. Gardeners are always thinking about the future, anticipating what's to come. And that's especially true at this time of the year, when you begin planting and preparing for a brilliant show of summer colour. Nothing says summer better than roses, and I'm going to plant a striking and very old shrub rose called Rosa rosamundi. You've got two options when you buy roses. One is to buy it bare root. That means it's got no soil attached to it, it's been dug out of the ground, and that's got to be done during the dormant season. So over winter and into the spring, but then there's a cut-off point. The other way you can buy your roses is as container-grown plants. And there, they're in pots, they're well rooted into the compost in there, and that means you can plant a container rose at any time of the year at all. I have chosen, because it's early enough, to grow them bare root. So here they are, 5 nice shoots. Not only have they got lovely tops, they've got very handsome bottoms too. Now, I can't stand around in the sunshine because I don't want these roots to dry out. What I'd do is get a bucket of water, soak them properly first of all. Buying bare root plants is often cheaper, but you can plant container plants at any time of the year. Whichever you choose, you need to prepare the ground before planting. I'm just going to fork this soil quite deeply, and I'm going to incorporate really good stuff straight from our compost heap. It's a real pleasure to get your hands into it. You want to make the hole quite a lot bigger than the rose roots that you've got. It just means it's going to be a much, much easier job for the rose to move out into that soil. And I'm going to incorporate something else which will get those roots off to an even better start too. It's mycorrhizal fungus. This will help the rose make a symbiotic relationship with all the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil. You sprinkle it onto the roots of the rose as you're lowering it into its planting hole, so it's still quite damp, and it's vital that it actually sticks onto the roots. There. And what I've got to ensure that is going to be below the surface. So I'm moving all this soil back in around it. You must ensure that they're watered thoroughly, especially things are bare rooted. Even if it rains, it's worth doing. And when it's watered, I shall use some more of this to mulch it, which will conserve the moisture, it'll keep the weeds at bay, and it'll make sure the thing gets off to a flying start. Now, I'm hoping that within a few weeks, those buds are going to swell. And I suspect that by the summer, we might even get a few flowers, these beautiful white and pink flowers, and that scent will just waft everywhere. As well as planting the sweet-smelling rosamundi, this is the right time too for planting lots of other delicious summer treats. Next, we're getting fruity. Changeable spring weather can make an adventure out of every day. Although you feel it's a bit much when it starts to snow at this time of year. On the other hand, it gives a whole different feel to the garden. I adore growing anything. Anything and everything. I love flowers, of course, but I also love growing stuff to eat. Masses of vegetables and loads of fruit too. But what I'm really short of is raspberries, because one lot of my raspberries just faded away. So I want to plant some new raspberries today. What did I say about the weather? I mean, stop snowing, the sun's beating down now. Beautiful blue sky too. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to walk the plank. So I'm going to put this plank down because I don't want to compress the soil. Raspberries actually grow naturally at the edge of woodland, so this is a perfect sort of spot for them. They'll get plenty of sunshine too, but they'll cope with this amount of shade. Look at these. These are my brand new raspberry canes. Now, if you're buying canes in the late autumn or over the winter, you can buy bare root canes and you'll probably get a little bundle. They're a lot cheaper than buying them in these containers, but at this time of year, that's your only option really. This variety is one called Autumn Bliss. So there are two different kinds of raspberries, those that flower in the summer and those that flower in the autumn, and you treat them quite differently. Summer ones are very vigorous and they need lots of support, but autumn fruiting ones will really just get on with it themselves. And in the spring, you cut them down just to a couple of inches tall, so they'll actually flower and fruit on new wood. So exciting. So I've spaced them about 18 inches to 2 feet apart. What will happen over the years is that they'll send out suckers and new shoots will come out. So I'm going to start with this one. So they should have been in these pots for quite some time and they should have a decent root system. Oh yeah, lovely. I'll put that down very carefully and dig a nice deep hole. You could easily grow them in a container of some kind, as long as they've got a really good depth of soil. Ready to lower this down, here we go. I'm just going to use the cane. Oh, look at that. Total guesswork, but it was a lucky guess because the top of this pot where this was planted, which is the crown of the plant anyway, where all the shoots are coming from, has to be level with the soil around it. And I'm pushing in right around the edge of where that pot was. And then move on to the next one. Take off these supports because those are unnecessary now, and then I can give them a really thorough watering. So here goes. You don't have to plant them in the snow, but they'll cope anyway because they're very, very hardy plants. Just as well, really. Plant your autumn fruiting raspberries about 2 feet apart. Give them a good depth of soil to grow in and cut them right back in spring. Everyone loves a strawberry and they're an absolute doddle to grow. Now I'm going to use these troughs, and strawberries really respond well to growing in a space like this. They don't need much depth of soil, but what they do like is sunshine, and this is south facing, and they love fertile soil too. You can grow them quite close together and get a brilliant crop. So you can grow them absolutely anywhere, on a balcony, in a courtyard, anywhere at all. I'm going to plant them about 6 inches apart. In it goes. I'll hold it at soil level, move that compost back in there, and then I'll firm it in nicely like that. And you want to make sure that the crown of the plant is level with the soil. You don't want to bury it too deeply. But as I'm doing it, I'm thinking about eating these strawberries. All you've got to remember is if you've got a really bountiful crop, and especially if the weather's quite rainy, just make sure that there's something underneath the fruit to stop them from rotting. So if you put shredded paper or dry straw, any dry material like that, and make a nice little carpet under the fruit, then that should protect them and make sure that you get to eat them instead of them rotting. You might have to watch the birds though. Before it starts snowing or hailing again, I'm going to plant one of my very favourite fruits. And this one can go on my terrace. I'm going to plant a gooseberry in a pot. It's nice to have a sit down too. Oh, that's better. Now, they're very northern things really, goosecogs. They have all these wonderful competitions who can grow the biggest ones. But I just love the taste of them. And they're so versatile, you can make so many things with them. There's nought like a gooseberry fool. So even if you haven't got a garden, gooseberries are particularly good. And this variety is ideal for growing in a pot. It's called Hinnon-Mackie Red, and it's bred to be really, really hardy. Well, to get this gooseberry off to a flying start, I've got a very standard big pot. And first of all, I'm going to put a layer of really good organic stuff in the bottom of here. Now, you would never use fresh manure in a pot because it would burn the roots, but this is lovely rotted stuff now. So, not essential, as you could just put it straight into potting compost. And that's what I'm going to top it up with. Just over the top of that, a nice scoopful. So, ooh. I'm going to lower it very, very gently into this pot. That then should be, yeah, pretty good. Always, always, when you're planting from a container, make sure that the top of the compost here is exactly the same as the one you're planting it into. So take your compost up until you reach that level. Now I'm just going to push that down nice and firm. It's very easy gardening, this, isn't it? But very satisfying. And because it's containerised now, keep on giving it a liquid feed, maybe every few weeks during the growing season. But initially, just water, lots and lots of water. Really good drainage in here, lots of holes in there. So it's not going to sit and get stagnant at all. So I think that's perfect. All that remains is to lower it into its pot. Just ensure, if it's a gooseberry you've got in a pot, that you find a sunny position for it. How about that? Voila! And I must make sure it has a really thorough water. I'm going to have to wait a while for the gooseberry to bear any fruit, but there's one fruit that might just be ready right now. This is such an excitement. Under these pots is my rhubarb, and I've been forcing it. That means putting these big pots on the top of it and deluding it that it's time for it to grow. So all those stems will come up, searching for the light. Now I put the pots on in midwinter or so, and in the normal garden, rhubarb is only just beginning to show now. Ideally, when you force rhubarb, you should actually wait until your plants are a few years old. But I'm greedy, I can't wait. Look at this. Oh! Oh, it's nearly pushing the top off the pot. Here goes. You ready for this? Oh. Ooh. Look at that. They're already bending and twisting over. Now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to take several of these stems. You don't use a knife. It's a sin to do that. You just slide your finger down. So you're taking that whole stem like that. There's one. How many do you think we need for a rhubarb pie? Or a crumble? So you're taking the whole leaf at the bottom. There's a little slug there, you can't have any. Isn't it pretty? Oh, it's such a delight. And it won't harm the plant because this was quite a big crown when I put it in. And if I make sure that I feed it well and I don't force this one next year, I just give it a year off, then it'll be absolutely fine. I'm going to have all these big fat ones. It's just a wonderful feeling. I mean, it's been snowing, the ground is bare, and yet look at this lovely, luscious young crop. Isn't that beautiful? I can't wait. Back on the top. Try not to squash it on its way down. And then when the weather gets a bit less cold, I'll take that off and just let the whole thing grow on. The leaves will turn really green, stems will be dark, and the whole plant can just grow completely naturally. If you want to force your rhubarb, you must feed well with compost or well-rotted manure. Cover your plants with a pot or bucket in midwinter. And don't force the same plant every year. I'm going to enjoy this bounty. Look at that. It's beautiful. Better than a bunch of flowers. Here, Thief. Look what I've got. I don't think dogs like rhubarb. Come on, Thief. Next, how to get more plants for your garden for free. Well, this is my brick garden. I kind of take it for granted now, but it hasn't always been like this at all. When first we came here, it was a field. It was a place to turn cars around. There was absolutely nothing here at all except a lot of weeds. So I thought, right, I'm going to plant lots and lots more plants. But it's a terribly awkward site. It really does slope a lot more than you at first realise. So we had to have a material for these paths which could go flat and at the same time you could use going downhill too. Brick was the perfect solution. You can also make steps because we've got some of them here and there. And the whole idea really was that because these beds are all separated by the brick path, I thought it would be lovely if the planting could sort of flow, jump across the path, go down the next bed and then carry on. But basically that was the main idea. Are you digging a hole? Can I put a plant in it? Hey? There's nothing static about gardening. Mother Nature moves things on constantly, but also you get so hooked on what you're doing. You constantly want to find new plants, put in new ideas. It's such an exhilarating process. It's all very well thinking about planting new bulbs, putting new plants in, but there's one thing that remains the same. It's a constant, and that is maintenance. There's no point at all having a beautiful garden if you just let the weeds go wild and you don't do things like I'm doing now. We've got very acid soil here and you get moss compacted on the top. So even though it doesn't prevent the plants from growing, it sort of curtails some of the smaller ones. So I want to get out all these weeds that are here, there and everywhere. And then I want to just fork the borders over very, very lightly, water well and then mulch. So sometimes people say, well, how do you tell what's a weed and which weed is it? But I think when you've been gardening for some time, you just gain that experience. And if you're new to gardening, if you didn't plant it and you're not in an established garden, so you haven't got self-seeding plants, there's a pretty good chance it's going to be a weed. So this is bittercress. It can spread itself everywhere. These dainty little white flowers will quickly turn to long, thin seed pods. And then the first sunny day you get, they burst, the seeds distributed, and you've got a whole sort of carpet of bittercress. You can eat it though. I'm not that hungry at the moment. So here I've got a geranium pretense that seeded itself just under this campanula. And invariably, with the exception of a few white ones, they're blue. So they fit in wonderfully down here. And we get quite a good show of them in the summertime. So although I didn't plant it, I'm definitely going to leave it there. Oh yeah. I'll tell you what, she's really good at digging holes, but she's not much cop at weeding. You don't discriminate, do you? No. With or without Fifi's help, I need to dig up some of my lovely heleniums. They're a feature of this bed. This clump is getting too big and congested here, and I want to divide it so I can plant some elsewhere. Right. I'm nearly there. There's my helenium, and if I get my fingers in here, maybe a bit of help from a fork first of all. Can you see in the centre here, there's the old flower stem, and sometimes you can actually use those as levers to pull your plant apart because that will never regrow. Yeah, and that's actually helping me to get a nice chunk out. So I've got how many rosettes there? Yeah, 3 decent rosettes. Now I probably could pull that apart and make 3 individuals. But that's a nice little clump, no old wood in the centre of it. So it's a fresh plant, it's raring to go. So I'll put that to one side for a minute. So have you come to help me? Yeah? And I'm left with masses and masses of it, this helenium, so I'm going to decide exactly where to put it. Get it all together. I started off just doing a bit of weeding, and look what I've ended up with. Enough heleniums to, I don't know, what would you do? You could plant a whole garden with these. Do you fancy a whole garden full of heleniums? Maybe not. Hello, you come to join us? Look at that, so. Are you coming? Come on. Look at the magnolia, it's really come out now. That's Leonard Messel, and it's this beautiful pinky lilac, really deep in bud, but it's when it opens these flowers that it's so beautiful. And isn't it lovely just to have a moment to appreciate what's going on? It's the essence of this time of year, really. Anyway, enough tea drinking and enjoying myself. Actually, I'm going to enjoy myself even more now because I'm going to divide these things. You might have to remove yourself, or at least let me bring these round here. Thank you. Could you hutch up a bit? Thank you. That's it. What I want to do is put some of these straight into the garden. I'll trim the roots a little bit as they go in, give them a bit of additional good compost from the compost heap, but I'd also like to put a few in pots. And when you pot them, if you're using clay, put a few crocks in the bottom of the pot. And then use really, really good compost. And they might be in here for quite some time, and that means they'll really keep going well. Not too much. A clump about that size is really going to make a wonderful plant. So if I put that in a pot like that, what's going to happen is that those roots will get all squashed up. They don't know which way they're going, totally confused. So I'm going to turn it upside down and just give it a little trim. Watch where you're going. Just straight across. Right, so that's going to sit in just the right place. And then it's so straightforward, isn't it? Then the most important thing, give it a very, very thorough watering. I want to finish it off, though, with some grit. Usual reasons: keep the moisture in, keep the weeds down, make sure the plant doesn't rot around its crown. You can either grow on your divided plants in containers, or you can plant them out elsewhere in the garden. In beds and borders, you can give them a real boost with homemade compost. People go on about this black gold, but that's really what it is. It's just the most important, the most valuable commodity you've got in a garden. It's compost. It's made from all the waste material from the garden, tops of weeds, old plants that have been deadheaded. We get some muck too to add to it. So this precious material, I'm going to use some of it under the plants, in the soil around them, and then afterwards, when everything's really well watered, I'm going to use it as a mulch and put it on as thickly as I possibly can. Ooh, it's lovely, this bit. Now that I've cleared a bit of space in the brick garden, there's another plant that really needs dividing, but it's going to take a bit of work because it's been here for years. Now I want to do some more division. I've got two great big clumps of Hemerocolis here, and they've been here for some time. And although they flowered really well last year, I can see they're getting quite congested. I think I might have to have a go with this, providing I can get it in the ground. And I think, yeah, it's just about out. It's quite a weight of it too. Actually, I expected the path to move, but no. Just the earth moved and the Hemerocolis came out. Hooray! We can still see the remnants of the roots all around, and that is one hell of a clump, really. I want to get it to a manageable size. Now, I could easily get a spade and put it right through the middle, but I would break some of the shoots. So what I'm going to try and do is put two forks into the middle of it. So the whole idea is that you use these forks as levers and you put them back to back and just push them down as deep as you can into there and keep on pushing. And then, because if you lever apart too soon, you'll just lever all the top shoots off. So you want to be right in amongst the roots. Come on, you weakling. Who said gardening was easy? Yeah. And then, with a bit of luck, you can see that's just one chunk, and that can be further divided. I could probably make 2 or 3 plants out of that. Finally, after wrestling my clump of Hemerocalis into submission, I'm ready to put the divided plants into the bed I weeded earlier. It's so nice to see this bit cleared now. The moss has gone, the weeds are out. It just looks so inviting. And I'm going to put these 3 lumps of Hemerocalis in here. Here we go. And I think the third one, that biggest clump, right there. I mean, I've done this so many times, but to me that's one of the loveliest things about gardening. You repeat these tasks, you do them over and over again. You never get fed up with them because they've always got the same purpose, making sure your plants are lovely, and it becomes kind of second nature to you. You just do it automatically. Plant before those shoots start to grow. Yeah. And along with the hard physical graft, your mind's always working on new ideas. Next, I've got a plan to start a cut flower garden. With a little bit of help from my friends, I'm planning out a few ideas for a new project. I love having cut flowers in the house, but I don't like spoiling my border displays. So I'm going to grow some specially for cutting. So making a cutting garden is such an exciting process because it involves you with producing plants in so many different ways. So first of all, the seed. You can grow seed by sowing it direct, or you can sow it in trays and move it on. Eventually then you'd get things like these little plants here, or you can get the little plants themselves by ordering them. It's not a pizza delivery. Aren't these sweet? This is what you call a plug plant. So they're just grown in modules and then they're packaged up. And then you've got two choices. If it's something that can stand the frost, you can put them directly into your garden. Or if it's something that's half hardy, then it's a really good idea to pot them up. So this is an antirrhinum, and it's a scarlet one. And all I'll do is lower that down very gently, so I'm not breaking any of the roots, but then firm it in. Antirrhinums are snapdragons. They're wonderful cut flowers. I'll look forward to potting the rest of those up later. But there's nothing quite like growing your own flowers from seed. It's the simplest way of propagating your own plants, and it's really satisfying to do. And I'll get something like this. This Selenum has made true leaves. These little ferny leaves in the middle here. And it's at that stage when those leaves are a decent size that you can actually start separating these plants and pricking them out. And all that pricking them out means is moving them on so that they've got a little space of their own to grow on properly without any check. Now I've got some foxgloves here. This is a white foxglove. And then I'll very carefully separate a clump off. I love white foxgloves. And all I'll do here is just separate these plants. So here we go. Ta-da! Lowering it down, pushing it in. And they want a bit of grit. Take it outside and water the lot when you've done several of them. And then those can probably go straight outside if you wanted to harden them off. If, however, you're doing something that you've grown in the greenhouse or the windowsill from seed, then it might be just as well to keep them in the same conditions for a short while, a few weeks, and then gradually introduce them to the outside world by putting them out each day and then bringing them in every night. And that way, they'll know that you love them. It's lovely getting all these plants ready for their new home. But there are a few things that I want to sow directly into the soil. I think this bed is just perfect for a little cut flower garden. I mean, it's not very big. It could be anywhere. It could be a bed that's just outside your kitchen door. You could even do this in a, fairly big trough or something like that. You can always make use of your vertical space too. I want to see a wall of sweet peas growing up the side of my shed. I'm going to put these little plants in. And I think what I'll do, because I want to sow some seed of sweet peas direct as well, so I'm going to alternate them. One plant, one seed. One plant, one seed, all the way along. Young plants will flower more quickly than seeds, extending the flowering season. And all you do is just push the seed down half an inch or so under the surface of the soil. Next, I'm going to plan where to plant a selection of plug plants, leaving room in between them to sow some hardy annuals directly into the ground. Well, creating a beautiful picture is not the aim of the game here. What we need to do is get a whole variety of plants that will cover a succession of flowering, so you'd be able to cut flowers right the way through. So everything can go in lines here. These annuals will make perfect cut flowers, but only for one season. But why not include a few perennials in your cut flower garden? Because they'll come up year after year. And if you choose carefully flowers that perhaps you can't buy in the shop, but make really, really good cut flowers, then you're onto a winner. I've got some peonies, and I love peonies as cut flower. They've become increasingly popular in recent years. So I want to add another one. There are 3 in there already, but this one is Sarah Bernhardt. She's utterly lovely, really voluptuous, very pink. And I'm going to put her in there. When you're planting peonies, never ever bury the crown of the plant. Always have them just under the surface of the soil. People complain that my peony won't flower, what's wrong with it? And it's nearly always because it's been planted too deep. There's the crown of the plant, that's where it joins the tubers. And that is just level with the rest of the ground. So even though it might not flower very much this year, in future years it's really going to love living here. So how lovely to have a few plants set aside in your own garden just for cut flowers. What a week it's been. The weather's thrown everything at me. I've had rain, snow, we've even had some brilliant sunshine, but some days it's been as cold as can be. And we've done such a lot nonetheless. And look what my lovely Neil's made for me. I've got a rhubarb crumble and a bowl of the prettiest pink stewed rhubarb you ever did see. And you won't mind, will you, if I just taste it? Next time we'll be adding more delicious things to eat to the vegetable garden. These are broad beans. They reckon they've even found evidence that they ate them in the Stone Age. As well as looking at the best plants for tiny splashes of alpine colour.